Hollywood blockbusters often paint a picture of long-haired captives dragged to burning altars for sacrifice. However, the true Viking victory rituals, hidden in mass graves, slave market records, and the foundations of Scandinavian temples, tell a completely different story. From Dublin's auction blocks to the ritual lands of Uppsala, the fates of captive women were far more complex and multifaceted than cinema portrays. What truly happened when the warlike Viking armies emerged victorious? What secrets do Bones and Byzantine chronicles hold about these rites? The answer lies in 3 documented practices that defined the treatment of captives after conquests. This was not spontaneous cruelty, but a systematic ritual integration that served important political, economic, and religious functions in the Scandinavian world. Most captive women never saw ominous altars. Instead, they faced auction blocks. At Dublin's bustling slave market, between 841 and 902 AD, an estimated 10,000 captives were sold annually. The annals of Ulster attest to systematic sorting after every major raid. Young women, especially those with craft skills, were valued highly. For instance, a skilled weaver was sold for 12 silver marks in 886. The daughter of a noblewoman, captured in Armagh, fetched a remarkable 24 marks, an amount sufficient to purchase 3 warships. The process was meticulously organized. Ships would return to Dublin Bay, and captives were held in wooden pens near the River Liffey. Traders from Hedeby, Birka, and Staraya Ladoga meticulously inspected their merchandise. Birch bark deeds from Novgorod have survived to this day. One transaction, dated 934, reads, "Mayor of Cork, weaver 16 winters, childless, good teeth," all for 8 silver marks. Another record mentions a girl of noble blood, literate in Latin, valued at 14 marks. The Dublin slave market operated on a truly industrial scale. Archaeological excavations in Wood Quay in 2003 uncovered advanced infrastructure, stone foundations for 17 auction platforms, iron rings embedded in sturdy oak posts for shackling, and drainage channels carved into the bedrock to remove waste from overcrowded holding areas. The archaeological team discovered over 3,000 foreign coins in the market layer: Byzantine gold, numisma, Islamic dirhams from distant Samarkand, and Frankish deniers from Tours. Each coin tells a story of a completed transaction. A 941 dirham from Volga, Bulgaria, found with charred organic matter, likely remnants of a bill of sale. A 953 Byzantine solidus, unearthed near platform foundations, bore scratch marks indicating its weight had been checked. Traders were true professionals. They tested silver purity with a touchstone, weighed gold on standardized scales, and expertly calculated exchange rates spanning 3 continents. A similar situation unfolded in York between 866 and 954 AD. English chronicles documented a system for processing captives, with the market located at the confluence of Coppergate and the River Ouse. Archaeological findings reveal wooden platforms, iron shackles, and thousands of foreign coins, Byzantine gold, Islamic silver, and Frankish deniers. The slave trade stimulated Viking expansion more than any other raids. Excavations at Coppergate revealed a sorting system, separate holding zones for different categories of captives. Children under 12 were kept in small, high-wall pens, women aged 15 to 30 in medium enclosures by the river, and elderly captives and wounded men in temporary shelters. They were quickly processed for local labor or disposal. Physical evidence attests to the brutal efficiency of this system. 17 skeletons from the market's operational period show healed fractures consistent with restraint injuries. Grooves on the wrist bones indicate constant shackling. Tooth wear points to a diet of coarse food, likely ship's biscuits and gruel. Signs of malnutrition were found in 80% of female remains, yet valuable captives faced a completely different fate. Religious sites demanded special offerings. The Uppsala temple complex, active from 550 to 1090 AD, processed captive women through meticulously developed 9-day rituals. Adam of Bremen's account from 1075 describes this festival. Every 9 years, all provinces send their representatives. No one is exempt from this rite. Excavations of the temple's foundation revealed a system, 3 sacrificial wells, each 17 feet deep. Human remains from various periods were found within them, predominantly female, aged 15 to 25. Bone analysis showed these were not random killings. Carbon dating places most deaths in the harvest season, from September to October, indicating a systematic schedule aligned with agricultural and military cycles. The Uppsala wells contained more than just bones. The 1926 archaeological team discovered fabric fragments, jewelry, and weapon shards near the human remains. One well yielded an entire amber necklace of 43 beads, originating from Baltic deposits. Another contained silver bracelets similar to Irish metalwork. The third held fragments of silk fabric, likely of Byzantine origin. Each artifact points to the captive's origin. The amber necklace matches styles characteristic of captured Prussian settlements along the Vistula. The Irish silver appeared after documented raids on Clonmacnoise in 988. The silk fragments date to 1034, the very year Harold Hardrada returned from Constantinople with captured Byzantine nobles. Temple records were preserved in runic inscriptions on foundation stones. One stone, discovered in 1907, lists 9 Old Norse names: Astrid the Irish, Valdis the Vandal, Ragnell the Cypriot. Another stone contains a ritual calendar: 9th winter after the king's coronation, harvest moon, 9 days, 9 nights. A similar strategy of inclusion was employed by the Rus, who controlled the Volga trade route. Ibn Fadlan's description from 922 vividly portrays the burial of a noble Rus on the Volga. The ritual required a voluntary sacrifice from among the captive women. The question, "Which of you will die with him?" determined the chosen woman's fate. The woman who agreed to this role received special attention. She was dressed in exquisite garments, provided constant supervision, and offered ritual drinks. The culmination was her death and cremation alongside the deceased lord. Fadlan's account reveals that this was not a random act, but a carefully planned choice. The volunteer became a link between the world of the living and the dead, ensuring the chieftain's successful passage to Valhalla. Her sacrifice was believed to secure the gods' favor for all endeavors of the remaining crew. Archaeological findings in Volga burials confirm the details described by Fadlan. The Gnezdovo complex, with over 4,000 kurgans, dates from 900 to 1050 AD. In 47 kurgans, evidence of multiple burials, including ship remains, has been found. 31 of these ship burials contain female skeletons, mostly aged 16 to 24. Isotope analysis shows that in 75% of cases, the women were of foreign origin. In one burial, discovered in 1993, a complete picture of the ritual sequence was preserved. A ship burial approximately 9 meters long contained a male skeleton in full battle attire, surrounded by weapons, silver, and trade goods. In the aft part of the ship lay a female skeleton, dressed in silk garments embroidered with gold threads. Traces of blunt force trauma were found on the woman's skull, consistent with Fadlan's description of ritual killing. However, the burial yielded surprises. The woman's skeleton showed no signs of malnutrition or injuries related to forced confinement. Analysis of her teeth indicated a diet rich in proteins and consumption of honey. Chemical analysis of the bones suggests she lived in abundance for several months before her death. This indicates that she was prepared for this role in advance, rather than being sacrificed at the last moment. The third practice combined ritual and economic aspects, marriages with captive women, transforming them into assets linked by kinship ties. Icelandic sagas contain hundreds of stories of captured noblewomen becoming wives, not slaves. Strategic alliances were sealed through forced marriages, which legitimized conquests and forged political connections. Egil's Saga recounts the marriage of Thorolf to Sigrid, daughter of a defeated Danish jarl. The wedding feast lasted 9 days, and Sigrid brought her father's treasures, 40 marks of silver, as a dowry. Her children subsequently inherited rights to Danish lands. Such a marriage could secure territorial rights for 3 generations. This system worked both ways. Scandinavian women, captured during raids on Celtic lands, became wives of noble Irish rulers. The Annals of the Four Masters contain numerous mentions of this. Germleid, captured in Dublin in 919, married the King of Leinster 2 years later. Her son claimed high kingship in 956. Marital integration followed certain patterns. A captured noblewoman retained her birth name but added a Scandinavian patronymic. At the wedding ceremony, she appeared in the traditional attire of her homeland, then adopted Scandinavian fashion. Her children received names combining elements of both cultures. Legal documents from the Icelandic parliament, the Althing, contain dozens of records of inheritance disputes related to mixed heritage. These marriages created diplomatic networks spanning all of Europe. Thorstein the Red's daughter, Groa, captured in Scotland around 872, married the Jarl of Orkney. Her grandchildren owned lands in the Hebrides, Orkney, and Iceland. When conflicts arose between these territories, her descendants served as mediators. Archaeological finds confirm this picture. Burials in Birka show integrated families combining cultural artifacts. In grave 854, a woman was buried with Slavic jewelry, Frankish coins, and Scandinavian weapons. DNA analysis indicates her East European origin. Her children's graves show full Scandinavian cultural integration in the next generation. The story of a woman buried in Birka around 925 is particularly telling. She wore a silver Thor's hammer pendant and Orthodox cross earrings. Her grave inventory included Byzantine silk, Arab coins, and a Frankish steel knife. This suggests she was an individual living at the intersection of multiple cultures. Analysis of her children's graves shows how the integration process unfolded. Her eldest daughter, buried in 945, wore exclusively Scandinavian jewelry and was interred with typical Scandinavian grave goods. Her son's grave contained only Scandinavian weapons and coins. Within 20 years, foreign elements completely disappeared from this family's material culture. However, integration was not always smooth. Some burials indicate cultural resistance. In a Hedeby burial dated 934, a woman was found buried with deliberately broken Scandinavian artifacts alongside intact Slavic jewelry. A broken Thor's hammer and damaged Scandinavian coins attest to a rejection of imposed cultural symbols. The Viking Age, shrouded in myths and legends, appears in a new light when we turn to numbers and archaeological finds, revealing the truth about the treatment of captives. Out of an imposing army of 200,000 captives seized during the peak of the Viking Age, only a small fraction, about 5%, became victims of religious rituals. A more significant portion, roughly 20%, integrated into society through marriage, finding new lives and status. However, the majority, a full 75%, entered the international slave trade, which stretched from icy Greenland to glittering Constantinople. This data, like a mosaic, is assembled from various sources, slave market records in Dublin, York, and Hedeby, testifying to the scale of human trafficking, archaeological excavations of temples, lifting the veil on ritual sacrifices, and marriage records from Icelandic and Norwegian legal documents, documenting cases of captive integration into Scandinavian society. Together, they form a clear picture of systematic exploitation and redistribution of human resources during the Viking Age. Approximately 75,000 captives destined for resale moved along clearly defined trade routes. The eastern route, like an artery, connected Novgorod to Constantinople, flowing down the Dnieper. The western route linked Dublin to Rouen, then overland to Mediterranean ports. The northern circuit connected Birka via the Baltic to Staraja Ladoga. Each of these routes had its specialized markets, dictating demand for specific categories of captives. Constantinople, a center of Byzantine luxury and culture, preferred skilled artisans and educated women capable of becoming tutors for noble families. The Islamic world, stretching from the Iberian Peninsula to Central Asia, needed young warriors and domestic servants. Western European buyers, engaged in agriculture and household management, sought workers for fields and homes. Scandinavian traders, keenly responsive to fluctuations in demand, adapted their selection methods to meet the needs of each market. Temple sacrifices, shrouded in a mystical aura, required specific conditions, major victories, seasonal festivals, and political legitimization of power. Most Viking raids did not meet these strict criteria. Ordinary wars, in contrast, resulted in captives destined for markets, not altars. This distinction was fundamental. Religious killings served to appease the gods, while the commercial sale of captives fueled economic expansion. The religious calendar, like a metronome, determined the timing of sacrifices. Major festivals in Uppsala, an ancient religious center, were held every 9 years, coinciding with the meetings of the things, where important political decisions were made. Smaller temples conducted seasonal rites during equinoxes and solstices. This calendar meant that most captives taken outside these timeframes automatically fell into the sphere of commercial exploitation. Archaeological data confirms this distinction. Religious burial sites contain rich grave goods, silk, silver, amber, precious metals, indicating the high status of the victims. Commercial captive processing sites, in contrast, primarily yield iron shackles, simple pottery, and organic waste, pointing to their low status and utilitarian use. The gods received luxury, while the markets processed at mass commodities. Excavations at Stamford Bridge, the site of the famous battle in 1066, shed light on the evolution of captive treatment. Mass graves contain mixed Scandinavian and Anglo-Saxon remains. Female skeletons bear the marks of captivity, healed wrist fractures from shackles, signs of malnutrition, and tooth wear from coarse food. However, alongside this, there are also signs of integration, Scandinavian-style clothing pins, a Christian burial orientation, and jewelry indicating an increase in social status. The Battle of Stamford Bridge was a turning point in history. Harold Hardrada's army, which invaded England, included over 3,000 warriors, many of whom brought captive women. After the army's defeat, these women faced an uncertain fate. The mass graves bear witness to both executions and assimilation. Some skeletons show weapon wounds, indicating violent death. Others, however, show signs of continued life and subsequent integration into Anglo-Saxon society. The final phase of the Viking Age was marked by a gradual transition to the integration of captives. As Viking territories stabilized and evolved into kingdoms, the treatment of captives became increasingly administrative rather than ritualistic. The Danish census of 1085 shows that thousands of foreign women were registered as legal wives, not slaves. Their children possessed inheritance rights, indicating their recognition as full members of society. The system of exploitation gradually evolved into a system of absorption. King Cnut's legal codes from 1018 solidified these changes. Captive women who bore children to Danish men automatically gained free status. Their children could inherit property and hold official positions. The law thus transformed military acquisitions into demographic expansion, contributing to the growth and strengthening of the Danish kingdom. However, the religious dimension never completely disappeared. Excavations in Uppsala in 1090 revealed the last sacrificial layer. 3 female skeletons were positioned around a ship burial. Carbon dating places their deaths in the months following the temple's conversion to Christianity. This final victory rite was performed at the moment of the old god's demise. These last sacrifices demonstrate desperation and hopelessness. The women were killed hastily, without the careful preparation characteristic of earlier rituals. Their grave goods were meager, simple iron rings, basic pottery, no precious metals. The old system was crumbling, but staunch adherents made one last offering to gods who no longer answered their prayers. The conversion to Christianity dramatically altered the system of captive treatment. Churches condemned the slave trade, viewing it as a violation of Christian principles. Bishops demanded the release of captives, calling for mercy and compassion. Monasteries offered refuge to runaway slaves, providing them protection and hope for a new life. The new religion provided a moral framework that challenged the entire system of captive exploitation. However, economic incentives proved stronger than religious prohibition. The slave trade continued under Christian rulers, but with a different justification. Captured pagans could be enslaved to facilitate their conversion to Christianity, justifying exploitation with religious aims. Criminals deserved slavery as punishment for their misdeeds, allowing their labor to be used for public needs. Debt slaves worked off legal obligations, enabling creditors to profit from their labor. The system adapted to new conditions rather than disappearing entirely. The tragic chapters of the slave trade, seemingly long closed, are being reopened thanks to archaeological discoveries. In 1993, construction work in the heart of Dublin led to a chilling find, shedding light on the final days of a slave market. Beneath the cobblestones of the medieval city, a stone chamber was unearthed, a silent witness to the tragedy of 127 female skeletons, ranging in age from 15 to 30 years old. Meticulous chemical analysis of the bones revealed a striking diversity of origins for these unfortunate individuals: Celtic, Germanic, and Slavic. Despite their varied ethnic backgrounds, a shared tragic fate united them. Dating of the remains pointed to approximately 1170, a period when the Anglo-Norman conquest brought an end to the slave trade in Dublin. The chamber became an ominous symbol of unwanted merchandise, victims of a collapsed market, women who were too old, sick, or expensive for quick resale. Instead of liberation, the traders chose to brutally dispose of them, entombing them in the stone chamber. The business model had failed, but mercy was alien to the slave traders, unwilling to show compassion for their assets. The skeletons bore traces of long and agonizing captivity, healed fractures from shackles, signs of chronic malnutrition and worn teeth, evidence of years of meager and coarse sustenance. These women endured many years in bondage before their lives met such a tragic end. Among the numerous remains, one skeleton stood out, belonging to a woman buried with gold bracelets and fragments of Byzantine silk. Chemical analysis of her bones indicated Scandinavian origin. Perhaps she was a Norwegian woman, the wife or daughter of a trader, who, by fate, ended up in this grim chamber. Even those who profited from human trafficking were not immune to the violence inherent in their own system. The Dublin discovery was not an isolated incident. Similar chambers began to surface in former Viking territories as the slave trade declined. Excavations in Winchester in 1987 uncovered 93 female skeletons in a sealed stone room beneath a medieval market square. In Coppergate, York, a mass grave of 87 women was found, also bearing marks of captivity. Similar findings were made in Chester, Lincoln, and Norwich. These discoveries pointed to a coordinated campaign to dispose of human inventory across England. When the Anglo-Norman conquest, spanning from 1066 to 1170, disrupted Viking trade networks, slave traders faced a severe logistical crisis. Thousands of captives transformed from valuable assets into burdensome liabilities. The chambers became a symbol of the systematic liquidation of human inventory. However, some women managed to escape a tragic fate. The pipe rolls, England's financial records, contain mentions of payments for the capture of runaway Norwegian women throughout the 12th century. Rewards ranged from 2 to 8 silver marks per capture. Higher payments were given to those who could identify former enslaved women by distinctive scars left by brands. Slave traders used branding to denote ownership. Archaeological finds in Dublin and York indicate the use of heated iron tools designed for branding people. The brands contained information about the trader, the woman's origin, and her professional skills. A circle denoted a domestic worker, a cross indicated craft skills, and a ship symbol meant sail abroad. These scars helped authorities identify fugitives even decades after their escape. Court records from Canterbury recount the story of a woman named Astrid, captured in 1156, who still bore the brand of a Dublin slave trader 40 years after her escape. She married an English farmer, bore 6 children, and owned significant property. However, the scar, a reminder of her enslaved past, became a source of inheritance disputes. Similar stories are found across Europe. The Domesday Book contains records of hundreds of foreign-born women who married English landowners. Many entries note their former enslaved status or Scandinavian origin. These women successfully integrated into post-conquest society, but their past remained permanently documented. The integration process varied by region. In England, former enslaved women could gain legal status through marriage or conversion to Christianity. Church records attest to hundreds of baptisms of women from the north in the 1070s and 1090s. The ceremony symbolically washed away their enslaved status and granted them Christian protection. French territories offered other avenues. Norman legal codes allowed enslaved women to redeem their freedom through skilled labor. Rouen textile guilds accepted former captives who earned their freedom by working as weavers for cathedral construction. Their expertise in creating intricate patterns made them valuable, despite their enslaved past. Flemish territories developed the most systematic integration program. The wool trade required skilled female workers familiar with various textile traditions. Captured Celtic, Germanic, and Slavic women brought with them knowledge of diverse weaving techniques. Flemish merchants offered staged liberation, partial freedom after 5 years, full freedom after 10 years. However, integration came with certain conditions. Former enslaved individuals were not permitted to testify against free citizens. Their children faced legal restrictions up to the 3rd generation. Marriage required the approval of the local feudal lord. Property rights were limited. Freedom did not equate to equality. During the Viking Age, despite the spread of Christianity, remnants of pagan traditions and economic realities continued to influence social inequality. Archaeological findings serve as compelling confirmation of these limitations. Burials of women who were once deprived of freedom are distinguished by the modesty of their grave goods compared to those of free women from the same period. The simplicity of their adornments and coarseness of their fabrics testify to their former disenfranchised status. Even successful integration into society could not entirely erase the economic legacy of enslavement. In some parts of Europe, old customs persisted longer. In the Orkney Islands, ritual sacrifices continued until 1135, and in the Hebrides, slave markets operated until 1186. The Icelandic Althing only banned slave ownership in 1117. Remote territories where central authority was weak resisted change. Merchant republics became the last strongholds of the slave trade. In Novgorod, the slave market operated until 1240, and Gotland traders continued to sell captives until 1220. The economic prosperity of these cities directly depended on trade, and with the cessation of the slave trade, their economies declined within a few decades. The Mongol invasion between 1237 and 1240 completed the process initiated by Christianization. The Golden Horde disrupted eastern trade routes connecting Scandinavia with Constantinople. Supplies of Byzantine silk, Islamic silver, and Asian spices ceased, which undermined the economic foundation of the slave trade. Archaeological data testifies to this transition. Coin hoards buried after 1240 predominantly feature local silver, with foreign currency being almost non-existent. Silk fragments disappear from burial sites, and precious metals and grave goods are replaced by amber and furs. The global economy that had supported Viking expansion narrowed to regional trade. The human cost of these changes, however, far outweighed the economic impact. Modern DNA analysis of medieval European populations allows for an assessment of the demographic consequences of the Viking Age. Approximately 8% of medieval English lineages show Scandinavian origins, introduced during the Viking period. Similar figures are observed in the populations of Ireland, Scotland, and France. Genetic markers tell stories of both integration and resistance. Some lineages demonstrate gradual intermingling over generations, indicative of successful integration through marriage. Others, conversely, reveal distinct genetic boundaries, indicating the existence of isolated communities that preserve their distinct identity. Descendants of captives adopted various strategies for cultural survival. Recent isotopic analysis adds another layer of understanding. Analysis of teeth from medieval burials can determine an individual's childhood location based on mineral content. Many skeletons show abrupt shifts, indicating that childhood was spent in one region and adulthood in another. These were children of captives, born into bondage and raised in foreign lands. Isotopic data also points to escape attempts. Some skeletons show multiple changes in location during childhood and adolescence, suggesting their parents repeatedly attempted to escape captivity before finding permanent refuge. Legal documents also preserved stories of escape. The laws of Edward the Confessor mention women who had escaped from northern ships as a distinct legal category. They could find refuge in churches, but only on the condition of converting to Christianity and renouncing their pagan roots. Monastic records document this process. St. Almund's Abbey accepted 47 women from the north between 1050 and 1080. Each received a Christian name, basic education, and was designated as a lay sister. Their children were raised in abbey schools and often became priests or nuns. The church's motivation was not solely charitable. Former enslaved women possessed valuable knowledge. They knew several languages, knew foreign customs, and maintained connections across cultural boundaries. Monasteries utilized these women as translators, negotiators, and sources of information. However, religious conversion could not erase the trauma of the past. Medical analysis of skeletal remains reveals persistent patterns. Former enslaved women show higher rates of joint diseases, dental issues, and stress fractures. Their bones preserve evidence of prolonged physical deprivations that continued to impact their health decades after gaining freedom. Children of captives were generally physically healthier but faced other challenges. Legal documents attest to inheritance disputes concerning children of mixed heritage. These individuals could claim property from both parents, but often faced opposition from relatives contesting their legitimacy. Nevertheless, some managed to achieve success. Matthew Paris's Chronicle recounts the story of Hingworth Horson, the son of an Irish captive and a Norwegian trader who became a wealthy merchant in London, owned 3 ships, and financed the construction of St. Bode's Church. Thus, his mother's captivity became the foundation for his family's prosperity. However, success stories were more the exception than the rule. Most children of captives remained in the lower strata of society, working as servants, artisans, or small farmers. Their foreign origin was noted in church records, but rarely mentioned in official documents. They lived between worlds, never fully accepted by either. The women who never made it to auction became unwanted merchandise. Their bodies were disposed of when the slave market collapsed. The Viking right to conquest did not end with the adoption of Christianity. It lost its power when conquest itself became economically unviable.